So, we're talking about interventions here, and we're talking, and your article kind of talks about the affordances of collection of player information through big data
Yes.
collection, and that's a big hot button issue right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you also mentioned that this process would require data privacy policy to protect the players, and that,
Absolutely.
kind of leads to a couple questions. But the biggest one I really want to know is that if a person, how do you incentivize the player? So if you're going to be doing big data collection, how if I would imagine that there's a certain amount of reluctance somebody might have to opt in, right? We're already opting in if when our game consoles, we're opting into all kinds of
Right.
policies, marketing policies constantly, and legal policies. But now we're adding another layer onto that, which is
Mhm.
kind of this, having it collected by for this research purpose. And how do you incentivize the players in those moments?
Well, that's a super complicated issue. The first thing to think about is that there's, when you're playing a commercial game, you're talking about commercial games, right?
I am. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When you're playing a commercial game, you really are often, if not always, giving the game company permission to do essentially whatever they want with your data.
Yep.
So from a research perspective, if a researcher like myself is simply getting a data set from someone else, then that is often considered not human subjects research.
Ah.
So this is something that's, again, is kind of unique to the biomedical sciences, because I found that in other fields, there's not this level of ethical oversight for not human subjects research. But yeah, if you're analyzing secondary data, which is data that you don't collect through interacting with participants yourself,
Right.
that is, in the US at least, that's termed not human subjects research. So it has different levels of oversight. So you wouldn't necessarily have to have people opt in, but best ethical practice, in my opinion, having worked with gamers and gaming communities, is to make sure that people understand that there's research going on. Because even though it
Mm.
happens all the time, and you may have people within the game, just like, researchers could be there just observing people. They could be sitting in the main city in World of Warcraft and just like watching people. That is one way to do it. But I think a better way to do it is to just be perfectly transparent, because as scientists, that's one way that we can help people develop trust in science, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in my research with the gaming community, we used notifications to
Mm.
notify everyone in the server that research was going on. And then we pinned a fairly long, but clear study description that talked about what we were going to be doing. And then we asked people if they wanted to opt out. So in this community of over 2,000 members, we only had one opt out.
Do you find that just because people are just so used to just opting in, okay, whatever, just
I mean,
and that's
the
it?
terms of
Yeah.
service are, we own your
Yeah.
data.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Right.
people are
Right. Right.
used to
Right.
that.
Right.
And
Yeah. People are used to it.
and I think for mental health purposes, especially, people are often very willing to help. I found the gaming community to be so supportive.
Mm.
Just really, it's very impressive.
Well, that's it. That's very, very interesting. And it's interesting because I know, if you were to meet someone on the street and try to pull them into a sequestered area, and can you sign this form and do all
Right.
this stuff, and then
Yes, that's so
give me an
hard.
hour of your time, and that would be like pulling teeth, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? But get them when they're in the kind of leisure mode and they're kind of already open to that.
Yeah. But what would be the best design, which really was so exciting to read the study. Cindy Shen and Dimitri Williams did a study around 2010 with
Mm,
Sony,
mm,
where they examined, I think, about 10,000 players of EverQuest 2. They had the ability to incentivize players to participate in an additional survey, which a survey is more interacting with people, right? Sony created a unique item in the game that players would be able to get if they participated in the survey. Can you imagine?
uh-huh.
I would love it if companies would do that. I think that would be such an easy way to get people to
Wow.
participate, to have that
Wow.
item. So
And
yeah,
it's speaking their language. It's giving them something they genuinely want.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's fascinating.
in my talks with the game industry, I've been pushing for that for a while. So who knows? Maybe it'll eventually happen.
So one of the questions that we're talking about, so we know we're talking about some commercial games, and I just want to kind of stay with this for a minute, because I think there's one thing that, and we've talked about this a little bit kind of before we started, but I want to kind of get this in our conversation here. Some of the games promote extreme amounts of violence and brutality as part of the core mechanics and story. One of the games that you always see cited is Grand Theft Auto, right? And one of the things that I've struggled with in helping students think about this course is that, man, does everybody talk about Grand Theft Auto a lot. And they always talk about the open world design. They talk about how it's related to this and how, all the interesting affordance of the mechanics, but they leave out a lot of brutality, of which is one of the major things that game is about. And so many people who play these games do not engage in this behavior in real life. In the past, there have been attempts in the media to draw clinical conclusions between people who play these kinds of very brutal games and some kind of psychosis or mental health instability. And how do you navigate in your work these kinds of stereotypes?
I think it's a little, oh gosh, that's a really hard one. I would have to say that what I keep coming back to is, yes, I understand the theoretical underpinnings based on the general aggression model.
Mm-hmm.
Those have been, it's been suggested that that is much too simplistic. It doesn't really describe the experience of people playing violent video games. And in any case, the ways in which people play games, like you said, is really important. And the trajectories that people follow, it's not paying attention to the context. Like, why are people choosing this game? What determines how they behave within the game? So basically, I think the thing that primarily drives that is the idea of moral panic, which has driven a lot of it's driven a lot of public sentiment about behaviors for a long time. You can think of it back to, thinking of alcohol use disorder as moral failing in the early 1900s. Homosexuality as being a mental disorder up until, I think, 1984. So sentiments change. The general public doesn't have a great understanding of video games. And I think many people's beliefs are still based on that. So we can also think about, why are we singling out video games for this when there are other forms of media and exposures that are pretty prevalent as well? So I think it's one of the things where, in science, sometimes these camps develop, and the camps just kind of perpetuate and are pitted against one another and drive the narrative.
I remember my father telling the story when he was young about comic books having the same kind of thing. And it's that, reading Superman comic books and violent comic books. And of course, they were much tamer back in the, decades ago. But, that was the great fear at the time, that was going to drive people to some kind of psychotic rage or something like that. And we, unfortunately, there are these very real situations where people, as we've talked about in their manifestos, have cited video games, and you've seen it in their play data, and when people have done kind of investigations after incidents have happened, and it's there, but that's not. I can't imagine that's most of the human population that's playing these games.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing that's always missing, and we find that this kind of selective reporting of these associations, when if you think about it, so we're selectively reporting this shooter's pattern of playing Grand Theft Auto. We're not reporting what the general pattern of playing Grand Theft Auto is, and we're not reporting what else the shooter has done. Maybe the shooter exclusively watches horror shows on streaming platforms 8 hours a day, or maybe they take the bus to work. I don't know. It could be anything. So
Right. Well, my last question is, and thank you again for this wonderful interview. This has really been insightful. And, my last question is, if game companies, mental health providers, and consumers agree to build up the collaboration to promote mental health, public mental health monitoring and interventions, what kind of governing bodies, let's say you get exactly what you want,
Yeah.
what kind of governing body would have the ability to provide oversight of the ethical standards were maintained? How would you navigate between these different disparate organizations, between the industry and consumers and the mental health? If you could get the ideal organization, how would that operate ethically?
I think my experience being in academia with institutional review boards in academic settings and within the Veterans Health Administration,
Mm.
and understanding how, government level kind of like regulatory bodies or investigating bodies work, I feel like the academic IRB, the Academic Institutional Review Board, would be the best flexible yet strict way of monitoring what comes out of these kinds of things, because
Mm.
they will generate research projects, right? We know that that's the goal. And we also know that while we can design research projects to provide benefit and protect human rights and human experiences in research, there can also be the potential for adverse effects.
Oh.
And academic IRBs, especially in the biomedical sciences, are familiar with ways to monitor very carefully and work in rules for stopping dangerous studies. So if we use an academic IRB, I think that gives us our best chance of avoiding the conflicts that would arise if the ethical oversight was, in a private organization. And it would also avoid the bureaucracy of having, like a strict governmental oversight.
And I'd imagine the trick then at that point would be to getting the companies, the game developers, and to buy into that. I'm sure there would be some negotiating that would need to happen to it, but if they were properly incentivized, they would be okay. I understand.
Yeah, well, that is a concern. They're starting to work with Oxford Internet Institute. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No,
Andy
that's
Shabusik's
interesting.
work. Oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely take a look at that. He's done some work with I don't think it was Animal Farm, Plants versus Zombies, I believe.
Oh, okay,
And
great.
maybe Animal Farm,
Okay.
Animal Crossing. My gosh, I can't even remember the most popular
Sorry.
game of the early days of the pandemic.
I played a lot of Plants versus Zombies, so you got me there. How's that?
Yeah. No, that's a great study to look at. But I think that aside from the incentivizing, really making sure that this is carefully positioned within the biomedical field, because again, in public health, our goal is to promote health and prevent disorder. So I think we, in a place like Hopkins where there's a lot of academic freedom, we have a great balance and experience working with industry specifically to conduct this kind of research in a proper setting of ethical oversight while making sure that we can mitigate conflicts of interest.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely a fantastic interview. I really appreciate you writing this wonderful article. Thank you so much for all of your insights.
Thank you. It was great. I really appreciate it.